Well, we won't send everyone cross-eyed with the absolute nitty-gritty of it, the fine print, if you like, Garry. But at the end of the day, this is one of the biggest trades in AFL history. 6 first-round picks, last year's number 1 selection, a premiership player as well in Luke Jackson, all involved, 4 clubs as well. So, in short, North Melbourne traded Jason Horne-Francis and pick 1 this year, and they got back picks 2, 3, Port Adelaide's future first, which could be a late pick if Port Adelaide contend next year, of course. And while the Power get in Horne-Francis Jr. Rioli, the Eagles parted with pick 2. They got 8 and 12. That was a big decision from them. And then the Giants swapped picks 3 and 12 for pick 1. And Aaron Cadman appears as though he is the man there, the key forward from country Victoria. So
just for those, just let me jump in there. There'd be a lot of people listening going, well, who's Aaron Cadman? Aaron Cadman is a 6'5", 6'6", key position forward who was, I watched a lot of the under-18 and was super impressive through the under-18 carnival for Vic Country. And he's the player that the Giants would seem to have done all this trading for so they can get their hands on a pick 1.
So here's a text from a North Melbourne supporter, Garry. This probably sums up the thoughts of many. Please explain how is getting rid of 2 pick 1s and getting in pick 2 and 3 fair for North, even if we get a few picks in the 40s and 50s? Seems like we've stuffed up again. Sad North fan. We might end up with no coach and no pick 1 from being last for 2 years. So it really depends on the circumstances at North Melbourne and how they look at the draft. What do they see in this year's draft? And what do they see in next year's draft? Now, Brady Rawlings said yesterday, as you said, we'll speak to him in about 15 minutes. He said there are 3 players at this draft that we rate very evenly, that we view them all the same.
Ahead of Cadman, obviously.
Well, maybe Cadman's one of the 3. So instead of getting 1, this way they can get 2. So instead of one of those 3, they can get 2 of those 3. But the problem is, trading out 2 pick 1s is such bad optics, isn't it? Like the way you look at it, it just jars when you see it. And if they're getting pick 16 back from the Power next week instead of what might be pick 8 or pick 7 next year, it's very hard for the deal to work out unless one of those kids this year, this is where Cal Toomey's all over it, but Shees or Wardlaw are an absolute game-changing superstar. And if that is the case, then they win. But we don't know. We won't know that for years. So it's hard to judge the decision without knowing the exact circumstances as to why they've made it.
At the heart of it, they clearly don't see Cadman as significant as the Giants do.
Well, not a distinct gap between him and the rest. Clearly they don't. No, they wouldn't have traded pick 1. Now, maybe GWS view it differently, and this is the art of recruiting.
Could they have held pick 1, traded Horne-Francis, got back into the very early stages of the draft anyway, and ended up with a tall Cadman and then one of the midfielders a little later on. So
these are, I guess, the questions for Brady. But in the cut and thrust of it all with that mega trade, Garry, was there an alternate? So as you're saying, could they have traded Horne-Francis? Now, I don't subscribe to the theory that they could have kept him. I think that would have gone beyond toxic next year. So let's just park that for a moment. He had to go, I think. So they trade him for pick 2 or pick 3, and then they get something back from some club, and then they can still get Cadman at 1. They got Larkey, they got Zerha. Maybe they've got a key forward in mind in 12 months' time.
I think that's probably the saver for them.
That they like more.
They go, look, this year's going to be a tougher year, it's going to be next year's going to be a tough year. We don't expect to jump too high. We're going to continue to get games into these kids.
Yeah.
We're probably going to finish, well, they won't say this publicly, but maybe bottom 4.
So there's a pointy end pick again.
So we're going to have pointy, and we've got Port Adelaide's future first.
Yes. That's right.
So we've got 2 first rounds next year already.
And then that gives them flexibility as well to maybe they package them up and move up the draft or whatever they might want to do. But as I said, when you're trading away 2 number 1 picks, one who's been there for 5 minutes and had a turbulent year, it's fair to say, and he's got a year to run on his contract and you trade him, and then you're trading this year's pick 1, that you can see why some North Melbourne supporters would be disenchanted.
So last year Adelaide offered 3 first-rounders for Horne-Francis, effectively, right? The Roos didn't take the deal.
Wasn't quite that simple.
Well, let me just work
it was 2 and a, let's call it 2 and a bit.
Well, they turned the picks into these. They held on to their 6, got Josh Rioli. They got the future first rounder that they were handing out goes to Dawson, who wins their best and fairest. And they now hung on to their pick this year and got Isaac Rankin. Yeah. Isaac Rankin. So they got Rochelle Rankin and Dawson.
Oh, no, but you can't blame North Melbourne for backing themselves in to keep the kid who hasn't even got there yet.
But that's what North are hoping they can turn 3 picks into.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. And there's the doom and gloom, and that's okay, I get it, the passion, all that sort of stuff. But there's that same sort of doom and gloom might have been around Adelaide. Oh, we couldn't get the deal done. Well, yeah, guess what? You've got Rioli, you've got Dawson, and you've got Rankin into your club this year. those three players you could have sacrificed had you taken Horne-Francis last year.
Sammy, you're missing one big thing. Jason Horne-Francis was always going to go back home, so why keep him? He may turn out to be not that good and you lose currency. They get 2 picks and Port could flop next year. They've always overpromised, never delivered. But how can you say he was always going to go back? He's only been there for less than 12 months.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, then why draft him in the first place? Was he a flight risk? Were there concerns that he might want to go back? And if there were, then why did they take him at pick 1? Clearly those concerns weren't there. They invested and they got him and they had obviously a horrible year.
And Aaron Cadman, we're all guilty of this. Aaron Cadman is just a player running around the under-18s who's tall and he's got a lot of promise. Now he's Stephen Kernahan.
That's
the way he's been written now.
Hey, that's what the trade period and the draft period is. You put him in the enhancer.
Yeah. Aaron Cadman, and I really love him. I love him as a player. I think he's competitive, and for a big key forward, you've got to want to compete. But gee whiz, has he been spat out with some extras on him?
So it feels like unders at the moment for North Melbourne, but time will tell. And
So two number 1 picks, and they won't have a number 1 player on their list. They've got pick 2, 3, future first rounder.
Yeah. So you can get some bloody good players at picks 2 and 3, Garry. And if that's how they're looking at the draft, then for them, I'd imagine it's a no-brainer. The West Coast one's probably a bit more surprising, splitting that pick 2 and coming back to 8 and 12, where things can get a little bit dicey. I reckon they've been the most generous in this mega trade, to be honest. And Port Adelaide, well, their modus operandi was obvious, wasn't it? They wanted Jason in. Imagine pairing him with the likes of Butters, Rosie, Marshall.
And I'm a massive Willie Rioli. I'm a huge Junior Rioli fan.
And that fills a need for them because Robbie Gray's obviously retired, one of the greats. Orazio Fantasia can't get on the park. Every club's crying out for that small pressure forward. If he can get himself fit again and in form and be happy off the field, which has been a big concern for him, then that could be a bargain.
They did trade out their future first, future second and future third. I didn't think you could do that.
No, it wasn't their own future second. They've retained that. That future second came from elsewhere, I think tied to Collingwood. So, yeah, they traded their future first and future third.
Would Horne-Francis have stayed if Clark, if all
I was going to ask you the same.
Had unfolded?
Oh, that's why I can't wait to chat to Ben Williams, his manager, tomorrow to see if nothing had happened with Alistair Clarkson and everything that we know is bubbling away in the background, would that have affected Jason Horne-Francis' decision? Perhaps it might have.